And while the big protests have died down, those who organized and participated in them say they have ideas, that the issues they're concerned about are not resolved. And they got an example of that this week. My colleagues Joe Ingles and Andy Chow examined all that.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
After more than a week of protests in cities, college campuses, and smaller communities, some demonstrators are taking their messages against racism and police brutality to individual movers and shakers. Protesters gathered this week in front of the home of Columbus City Schools Board of Education President Jennifer Adair, demanding she and other board members get rid of a contract that allows the city's police officers in school buildings.
CPD in schools does not increase the amount of safety, but instead it actually causes an increased amount of fear in the lives of students, especially Black and brown students.
While cops have been in schools for years and many community members are in support, these protesters say money spent on that could better be used on more counselors or social workers. Adair says she welcomes that conversation.
I think this is the time to really talk about it and talk about it as a community, to get people around the table, parents, students, teachers, the police themselves.
Groups representing workers, especially those who are low income, are also saying this movement is a movement for them. They're pushing for an increase in the minimum wage, an end to wage theft, and ways to make workplaces safer. All issues which they say disproportionately affect workers of color.
That workers need to have a voice about how their workplaces run. We believe that they need to have protections that are adequately enforced, and that they should not be afraid of retaliation for voicing any concerns they might have, which again primarily impacts low-income, immigrant, and communities of color.
And advocates point to a provision in the resolution declaring racism a public health crisis, which requires laws and ordinances to be reviewed with a racial equity lens.
Whenever policymakers are looking at a piece of legislation, they should do an analysis. How does this impact health? How does this impact health disparities? And how does this impact racial disparities? We already do this at the state level, certainly for the economic consequences of the legislation we're putting forward.
The Republican leader of the Senate, who stopped by the racism resolution hearing, says he wants to hear more about the issues facing Black Ohioans.
But some of the things that we're going to be focused on will be certainly infant mortality and maternal health, and that's something that Representative Crawley and I have talked about before, and something that needs a lot more work, frankly, but also on anything we can do to alleviate economic disparities throughout the state, creating more opportunities for minorities in the job market.
But also during that hearing, Senator Steve Huffman, one of President Larry Obhoff's caucus members and a doctor, was heard asking a shocking question of the head of the state's Minority Health Commission.
I understand African Americans have a higher incidence of chronic conditions, and that makes them more susceptible to death from COVID. But why does not make them more susceptible just to get COVID, and we know it's twice as often correct? Could it just be that African Americans or the colored population do not wash their hands as well as other groups, or wear masks, or do not socially distance themselves? Could that just be the explanation of why the higher incidence?
Huffman issued a statement later saying he regretted the unintentional, awkward way he asked his question, which he said was perceived as hurtful and was exactly the opposite of what he meant. He said he was trying to focus on why COVID-19 affects people of color at a higher rate. Representative Stephanie House, the president of the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, responded for that group, saying this is an example of the internalized racism and obstacles Black Americans face. She said the fact that a well-educated lawmaker and doctor would, in a public setting, nonchalantly use such antiquated terminology paired with a hurtful racist stereotype reflects how unconscious this problem of racism is for too many. Black state lawmakers say they'll be pushing for changes, just as they and their families always have.
No right is ever secure. You have to continue to participate to secure the right.
No racist police!
But it's not just policy changes that are being sought. In cities and small towns everywhere, many white Ohioans are also seeking change.
As white people in our community, we're all of a sudden awakened to this reality that our Black members have dealt with their entire lives. And so I don't want us to press the gas and feel like we have to act right away without making sure that we're listening to our Black leaders.
Black leaders say they welcome a community dialogue.
That is exactly what we need. More people that are speaking out and speaking up against things that they see that are racist.
And there are a lot of ideas being talked about, from the practical and innovative to the improbable and politically unworkable. Joel Ingles, State House News Bureau.